Welcome to the Real Estate Investing School podcast. I'm your host, Joe Jensen. Today, our guest is Jay Helms. Jay is actually a financial freedom achiever, a real estate investor living a nomadic lifestyle with his family of five. Founder of the W2 Capitalist and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You know, when I think about the nomadic lifestyle, that I travel quite a bit, and I'm like, man, that's pretty intense when people do this even more. And with a family of five, that's a whole other ballgame.
It has its challenges, yeah.
Yeah. So how old are your kids?
They are 8, 6, and 4. So we got this boy, girl,
Okay.
right? So my wife, when we first started, we've been doing this for about 3 years now, and I was trying to convince my wife, let's do this when they get older, and so they remember kind of some
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So they know we got to do it now. They don't take up as much space. We don't have to pack as much and whatnot. And so we've made some really great memories in the last few years. But yeah, it has definitely come with its challenges.
Yeah, I bet. So describe to the listeners what you mean by a nomadic lifestyle.
Yeah, so another phrase for it is like slow travel, right? So a lot of people when they
Mm-hmm.
go places, they go on vacation, they're going to spend a couple of night, a long weekend to maybe a week or two. And so when we go places, we'll stay a minimum typically of about 2 weeks, and then up until 5 or 6 weeks.
That's
And
cool.
so it will like this. We just got back from. We did 70 nights, and I posted about this in my community, so I know the stats are off the top of my head. So we did 70 nights. 14 of those were in hotel rooms. So if we're driving and it's a long way away where we're going, then we'll stay in a hotel room just for the night, and then get up and drive more the next day. And then the other 56 nights were in 3 different Airbnbs. And so we left. We're based out of Gulf Breeze, Florida, and so we left on May the 24th, and then we were in Winter Park, Colorado. We drove a total of it was over 7,000 miles, but we spent. You're in Texas, right?
I'm actually in Utah now.
Utah. Okay, so Texas is a big state.
So
I
big. I
don't.
used to live
Yeah,
in Texas, and it's it's crazy.
so we got on I-10. We drove, from Baton Rouge or through Baton Rouge and then up through the panhandle of Texas. And it just felt like Texas was just going to go on forever.
Forever. Yeah.
But we spent, 5 or 6 weeks in Winter Park, Colorado. Spent a couple weeks in Moab, Utah, in the
Heck
desert
yeah.
in the summer. I cannot recommend that.
It gets pretty hot, man.
And then we went to Montana and spent some time in Montana, and it was a great. And then we made the long haul back to Florida. It was a little over 2,000 miles in about 5 days. So that was
Wow.
a bit of a stretch for everybody involved.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Well,
That's
yeah, the traveling thing, man. We go places. We don't like real big tourist attractions. Like we've done that, and it's just not appealing to us. We like to go to
mm-hmm.
the real small places. For instance, when we were in Montana, we stayed in a town called Ennis, which
Okay.
nobody probably has ever heard of.
Yeah.
We saw more deer and pronghorns than we did people because of where
That's
we were.
awesome.
But they had my only two requirements is we got to have good, solid internet connection, and I've got to have a place where I can actually conduct business, right? And we got to stay within a budget. So that was the other thing. So yeah, it's been amazing, and we're about to get ready to go on another trip. Where to? We don't know. We haven't seen our family in quite a while, so we're going to spend a couple weeks visiting family, and then off to who knows? Probably East Tennessee. We like the East Tennessee area, so.
That's cool, man. Yeah. So a couple of things I want to dive into that was like one, I think it's cool that you see a lot of these like van lifers or RVs or bus life. And,
Yeah,
when I heard, oh, nomadic lifestyle, that's what I imagined first. And you're like, no, we just drive and stay in Airbnbs and hotels, but we still do the slow travel thing where we hang out for a while. And I'm like,
yeah.
that's so much, I don't know. I just think that's really cool. People don't really
We
talk about that. It's not as trendy on social or whatever, but
it's
it's like, that's a very good way to do it.
yeah. We did the RV thing for about 6 months,
Okay.
and it was a big RV too. It was like a 42 footer, had 3 or 4 different slide outs. I think it was 4 slide outs. It was, from an RV standpoint, it's big. It's 400 square feet, right?
Yeah.
But for 5 people, it's tight. It's really
Yeah.
tight. And we bought it used. We got it inspected and everything. But for the time we were in it, we started noticing things that just were not up to par. And actually, it had been in a wreck, wasn't disclosed to us, and it was not safe to tow. Although we towed it for about 2,000 miles while we had it, and we eventually got rid of it. We disclosed when we sold it to the buyer. We said, "Look, man, it's got a bent frame on it. No shop will work on it. Insurance says it happened before we bought it." And he goes, "That's fine." He goes, I'm getting divorced. I'm need some place to live, and I'm going to park in a lot. It's never going to be moved."
Yeah. Perfect.
Here you go, man. Yeah. But yeah, we did the RV life for a little bit, but we found, and we've been talking about getting another one, but um, we can fit into a 2 bedroom house a lot better than we can a 400 square foot RV, and
Yeah.
still have room to do everything. And yeah, yeah, it's different. It's not. I don't know of any groups or things like that are out there. Like with the RV community, there's tons of
Right.
full-time families and stuff like that we joined. But yeah, we do it a little bit different, and that's the cool thing about slow travel or just life by design. You take inspiration from other people, but you do it how you want to, right? And that's
Yeah,
kind of
and
what
this
we're
whole
doing.
time you're on this trip, you're traveling 70 plus days on the road, but you're still working, managing your portfolio, keeping
Yeah,
things running. And that's what I said, those are your necessities. I need to have an internet and a place to work. So,
yeah,
what does your work day look like when you're
yeah.
on the road or even when you're home? Like, what does it take to kind of maintain and build what you're doing with real estate?
Yeah, so most every day, somewhere between 8 and 9, I have at least a phone call. It's either with my VA or our partners for our lending side of our business. And so um, I talk to either my VA or my partners at least once a day. It's over Zoom. We hash through issues and kind of make sure we're planned out the week or do the week ahead. And then a lot of it is figuring out how to grow, right? Whether it's growing the W-2 cap list, looking for leads for our lending business, or looking, we since we've been on this nomadic lifestyle, here's how we did that, right? So I got laid off in May of 2020, and it wasn't like 2 minutes after I told my wife, "Hey, I got the phone call from my boss." She goes, "Okay, great. Now we can travel like we've always wanted to." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, wait a minute." I was like, "I just got to digest. Like the cold sweat hasn't even dried up yet,
Yeah.
because there was 6 figures. It just went away."
And let's
And
back up a little bit. Had you been
yeah,
investing in real estate already at this point and
yeah,
had a portfolio? Okay.
yeah. So I had started investing about 8 years, 6 years prior to that.
Okay.
And so we had a decent portfolio, right? And so we were living off my salary, and then my wife stayed at home, mom of the 3 kids, and then whatever we were making on real estate investing, we were just putting back, and then that was building up our down payment for our next property, and just repeating that whole process, right? Earn, invest, repeat. That's where that came from. And so yeah, so then then she was like, "Hey, let's travel," and I was like, "Well, what are we gonna do with the house?" And she goes, "Let's turn it into a B and B." And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, and I fought it for like a year, and she finally broke me down. And I was like, "All right, what do you think we can get per night here?" And she was like, "I think easily we can get 450, maybe 500." And I'm like, "No way. I don't believe that one cent." And so we started interviewing cleaners, right? And I would ask the cleaners who have been in the business and clean properties all over where we're at. Gulf Breeze, Florida is near Pensacola Beach and Navarre Beach. And so very, coastal touristy town. And every one of
Hmm.
them said the exact same thing. You can probably get 450, $500 a night. And I'm
You're
like,
just like,
no way. I was like, all right, well, so, and of course that just has kept going up and up and up. So we average that on a nightly basis, and we get, when we're gone, it's about 70% occupied. And so while we do that, now we get to go, live our nomadic lifestyle and just travel. And so it doesn't matter if I'm here or if I'm, wherever I'm at, as long as we have solid internet connection, I can check in with my VA, get with my partners. We self-manage a 20-unit portfolio. Most of that's going really, really well, just because of the systems and processes and teams we have in place where those properties located. Got a fourplex that's not doing so good, but
There's always something in the portfolio that
yeah.
just like eats up all your time. You're like, why?
Well, it's I've had one thing after another come up with this property, and it all comes down to me trying to do it on the cheap side,
Mm.
right? And so I hired a handyman. We've got 2 units that are empty. He turned out to be just a train wreck but I thought I was doing my due diligence with him. I gave him a little project, he knocked out of the park, right? So the next project was a little bit bigger, and the next project was a little bit bigger, and then the unit came available, and I was like, hey, what does it got to take to get this unit available or ready, rent ready? And he gave me a quote, started working on it, and then 2 weeks or 3 weeks into that, somewhere the wheels fell off. And I don't
Mm.
know what happened or whatever, but he eventually, long story short, he eventually became non-responsive to text, phone call, or email. So then I fired this next handy guy, right? Came as a recommendation. He goes over there to start inspecting the unit, opens the door, and somebody's asleep on the floor, right? He didn't know who it was. He was walking in expecting it to be, empty, freaked out, left. I call the cops. It was him, right? So he was squatting in the place. We
The
had
old
to get rid of him.
handyman.
Yeah, the old handyman. Yeah, yeah. And so now I've just been figuring out. I've got quotes from general contractors who are much more expensive than the handyman were.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? I'm tired of it sitting empty. Two sides pays for it, but I'm tired of not making money off of it. So I bit the bullet or whatever the phrase is there, and signed the contract last week for these guys to get started. So there's that one. But I
Yeah.
do feel
Always.
like if that was maybe in town, I probably, if we weren't traveling as much, it would have had more of my attention. I struggle with spending. It's going to take, so between the 2 units and exterior, it's going to take about 50 grand for us to get it the way it
Mm.
needs to be. And I struggle with putting that amount of money in there. And I was talking to Adam Zock. Adam, I think, is who connected us, right?
Yeah.
And Adam is so smart, and I value almost everything he said. He's very risky. His investing style is a little bit more risky than mine. But he said, Jay, he goes, I was telling him this situation. He said, let's say it takes 50 grand. Okay, what's your interest rate on that property? I was like, well, it's like 4.5. He goes, where can you get a 4.5 interest rate on a property right now that you can invest that 50,000 into? I was like, I can't, you know.
Right.
And he said, if you're doing a hard money loan with it, how much interest rate are you getting? I said, well, I'm going to get 12%, so that's $500 a month, right? Goes, and if you invest this 50 and get those 2 units rented, how much money are you going to make a month? I was like, about 2 grand. It's about going to be 1,000 per unit. And he goes, so which one should you do? I was like, damn, Adam, that's why I love talking to you, man, because you just made the light bulb go off, you know?
Yeah. I love that because if you just look at your cash on cash return on that, it's like,
It's
2 grand a month, by the 50 grand you put in, you're getting like a 48% cash on cash return. It's like,
it's
yeah,
but
where else
it's
are you going to get that return?
you're not. And it was the entire thing that was holding me up, other than I was trying to do it cheap, right? Is just the mental aspect
Well, it's a
of
lot of cash to pour into an asset you already own.
and
It's
you
like,
already own. Yeah.
like I already
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel you.
Yeah.
I've got this one that just went vacant. It was this crazy. like I said, there's always the one, right? It almost was a eviction, but luckily I was able to be like, I will pay you. I'll pay for your U-Haul. I will pay for your friends to load it. Just get your stuff and go. And
Get
like,
out.
I'm just like, whatever it takes, right? And
Yeah.
she ended up leaving finally. And the funny thing is, she wasn't even on the lease. It was her ex-boyfriend who they got a restraining order. He got kicked out. So now I've got this like
She's not in the
random
lease.
person who is never even supposed to be there, but it's in New York. So they're like,
Oh, geez. Yeah.
you can't
You're
evict
even
in New
worse.
York. It'll take a
Yeah.
lawyer in 6 months. And it doesn't matter if she was ever on the lease. Like, well, her stuff's in there. So it's her house. And I was like, what
Yeah.
the hell?
Yeah.
Anyway, so
Squatters'
luckily
rights, man.
she finally got her out. But yeah, now I've got to pour all this money into, repairing it, all the damages, and it's like vacant and the loss of rent. You're just like,
Yeah.
dang, like that's a bummer, But like I say, if you look at the whole picture, it all pans out, and you have the reserves for a reason, But
Yeah.
so what has been your strategy then? So you said you self manage about a 20 unit portfolio. Let's talk about like what your strategy's been to get that up to it, and then we can dive into some of the other like more of the businesses that you're running as
Yeah.
well.
Self-managing was not in the picture
Mm-hmm.
until about a year ago. So it never was a desire. We've bought and sold, properties. We've been just when I say we, my wife and I'm acting like she's sitting right next to me, but she's not. Um, so we've bought and sold properties, duplexes, quads, single family homes. We've also been a general partner on a syndication, been a limited partner on a few syndications, and then we've um, done some hard money lending, private money lending, and then we have a joint venture, which is a 16 unit property that's part of that 20 unit portfolio. And about a year, it's almost, yeah, about a year and a half ago, we just started noticing, my partner and we just started noticing as we're reviewing the monthly financials. Number one, they were a few months late. And then when things just weren't adding up, right? Report come in, it shows how much money was collected, would go to our bank account, and that much money wasn't deposited,
Mm.
right? And just as the more we got into it, the uglier the story it got, right? And so we had to basically fire the property manager, take over the property, and when we took it over, tell you how bad this was. So this is a property that generates close to 9 grand. At the time we took it over, it generated about 9 grand a month, and our accounts receivable was close to 18,000.
Wow.
And I said, okay, we got tenants who haven't paid. So that means y'all have posted notices and started eviction process for these six folks that or yeah, I think it was like six folks that were behind. Like, no, we hadn't done any of that. Why not? Well, we're trying to work with them. Well, when it started getting real ugly, I was like, I need to talk to the tenants. I want to talk to the tenants, kind of understand what's going on. All the tenants had this. Now these tenants, they're multiple addresses, so they're not right next to one another. But all the tenants had this same story, and that was, I paid rent, I was told to pay with a money order, and
Oh
no,
my
I don't have the
gosh.
receipts.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
so the first thing I told our property managers, hey, you're no longer accepting money orders. We're not doing that. And he fought me on it and said, no, we're accepting. It's legal tender. We can do it. Like, okay, and about a month after that's when we fired them. And so we have since then reduced that accounts receivable down to about $600.
Oh my
Some of that was from the tenants who kept their receipts from their money order receipts, and they were also told to mail in the money orders, not go to the office and pay it or whatever. And so some of that was the property manager. We provided the receipts to the property manager, and they went, oh yeah, actually it was our fault in accounting. We made a mistake and we applied the credit to the wrong person or to the wrong unit or whatever, a different property. I'm like, sounds good. You guys are fired. So,
Yeah.
but our it's been one of best blessings in disguise. We've almost retained all of that accounts receivable. There's still some that are out there that's probably never going to be, to be able to get back. But not only have we increased rents across the board, but our tenants, the more I talked to them, understood that their maintenance issues were not getting resolved. Right, there months would go by, like water
Yeah.
leaks, and nobody would do anything about it.
Jeez.
And so now that's just been a blessing in disguise to take over because uh, making a distribution to your partners is a good thing to do. And we're finally back on schedule to do that after we have built our reserves back up.
Wow, that's
So
crazy.
it's
So that
just,
that manager was just straight up embezzling funds and just lying every which way.
I mean, that's my speculation. We did hire an attorney or consult with an attorney who wanted us to go after him, and then the joint venture partnership discussed it, and it was going to cost us about 30 grand to
Mm,
go after him. And it was one of these cases where if we win, they would have to pay for our attorney fees, that
sure.
30 grand of attorney fees. But basically, we just came down to it and says, look, nobody has the energy for this, and we're basically there's potential for us to uh, was it taking good money and chasing bad, because
Hmm.
if it goes to a judge or a jury or whatever, it's kind of in their hands. Um, and the entire time our attorney was saying, look, if they were instructed to pay with money orders and nobody has receipts, then can you blame that on the property manager? Maybe there's something there with negligence, right? That they didn't treat it right. But you got to think to yourself, is a judge going to see it that way?
Well, and at the end of the day, even if they do, the judge can say, "Yeah, you owe this much money," but he still gotta. He
Still got
doesn't.
to
If he
pay.
doesn't have
You
the
still got to
money,
pay.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
he's still gotta
And
pay. So
yeah.
it's like if he doesn't have the
So
money or they can't force him to pay, it doesn't matter even if you win. But you
it,
still had to
it
pay
would have
your
been
attorney,
it
so
would have
it's
been a
messy.
multi-year ordeal. And we're just like, look, just cut it, and we'll go, we'll get it back on track, and just lesson learned.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Well, that's cool you guys were able to get it back on. So you own the 16 unit and then just a couple duplexes or something that's kind of your long hold stuff.
Yeah, so I've got the 16 unit it's a joint venture with five other guys. My wife and I, we have that one fourplex is troublesome, and then
Oh,
we
that's
have
right, the
our house
fourplex.
here that's a B&B, and then we're a limited partner in a couple of different syndications. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's super cool. So then let's go pivot a little bit to the business side then. Now you're running
Okay.
W2 Capitalist. You've
Yeah.
wrote a book. Like what's kind of the business side of what you're running and building beyond just growing the portfolio?
Yeah, so the community side of it, right? And so that the book is basically a lead magnet for anybody who needs community to help you out. And this is kind of where the reason why the W2 Capitalist was started is I'm an introvert, and a lot of people laugh when they hear me say that, or we meet and they're like, but you just don't seem that way, because they'll hear me or see me on podcasts or whatnot. I'm like, yeah, but I get in a crowd of people I don't know. I don't want to talk. There's a
Right.
meetup Thursday night, and I called an extroverted friend of mine who's wanting to he's got one rental now, and he's wanting to do more. I was like, hey, let's go to this meetup. The only way I'm going is if you're going with me. So I can, when people come up and talk to me, hey, this is my extroverted friend, Jason. Go talk to him. I'm just going to stand here. And so when we were first getting started, my wife and I, we just had moved down to the Pensacola area, and didn't really know anybody. Really hard to meet people when you're introverted, right? But I've been working remote for years leading up to that, and I got very comfortable behind, a keyboard and and a camera. And I had joined a mastermind community. It wasn't for real estate investing, for something else. And I got to see what they were doing. I was like, damn, I can do that, and I can start talking to people about real estate investing. And so that was in 2018. And this thing now has just morphed into, we have the mastermind, which is our higher end item. We have the pro community, which think of it as like the cheap seats. If you go to a baseball game, you're up in the upper deck, right? And then and now this is more last year. A couple of the members of the mastermind and I, we launched W2 Cap Capital, which is our lending arm that we lend into for members of the mastermind, right? So hard
Mm,
money loans kind of thing. So it's really spiraled into this beyond wildest imaginations. I initially started it thinking, hey, I just want to meet people who I want to hang around with, right, and talk real estate because I didn't want to drive to the local RIA. It was like 45 minutes away. My wife was pregnant with our first one then, and she was having some complications, and I didn't want to be away from her in an event or whatever. And plus, I just didn't like going. I didn't like going and being in a crowd of people that
sure.
I didn't know. So, but yeah, now it's morphed into this. We used to be on Facebook, not on Facebook anymore. We have our own branded community where there's no ads, there's no distractions. Come in, we're talking about real estate, right?
Nice. So you've built this community of real estate investors, and then you also help with funding these projects. So you're giving them tools and you're making money off
Right.
of lending that
Yep.
money.
Yep.
And then what's the name of your book?
Make an offer.
Make an Offer by Jay Helms. All
There
right.
you
And
go.
that's on Amazon if people want to
It
find
is.
it.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah, actually, if they want a free version, one of the promos we're doing this year is I'll give you the link. I can give it to you now or at the end, whatever. But I'm basically giving the book away for free, either PDF. I think we have some audio like coupon codes that Audible gave us, and or if you want a hard copy, I'll ship you a hard copy. So
Oh, cool. That'd be awesome. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes for any
okay,
listeners that want to jump on that. And we'll put a link to your community and all the resources that you've got out there. It's funny with real estate, it's such a interesting environment where it's like the more the merrier. There's such an abundant mindset.
mm,
And I feel like the more I'm around people, it's just like everybody just wants to help everybody.
yeah,
And it just seems to work out. And so I love being involved with more and more people and everything like that. It's like
mm,
even more than like the resources, like, oh, no, this person helped me fund this, or I did a project with this person. Those are cool opportunities too. But it's almost just like keeping your mind sharp on the goal
yeah,
constantly
yeah,
just
yeah.
trains your brain to think about it right so that you actually see and take action on the right kind of deals. And I think that's one of the most powerful parts.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'll do, like for sometimes I'll do like some consulting for free, and I know consultants tell you not to do that, but it's a real quick exercise, right? And most people say, look, I have trouble finding deals, or if I have trouble raising capital or whatever. I was like, all right, let's do this quick exercise. I was like, get out your phone and grab their phone, right? So let's go to your most recent calls. Before you do that, let's get a sheet of paper. The top left hand, you're going to put growth friends, and on the right hand, you're going to maintenance relationships. You're going to make two columns, right? I borrowed this or I stole this from Hal Elrod, by the way. This is not something I
Okay.
came up with. And basically, I was like, let's go to your 20 most recent calls, and we're going to label these people in one of two categories, right? The growth relationships or maintenance friends, right? If you talk to this person about real estate, investing capital, whatever the problem that they're talking about, right? That's if you talk to them about this, they go in the growth friends column. Everybody else, I don't care who it is, it could be your mom, your brother, sister, whatever, they go in the maintenance relationship side. And so we go through the 20 most recent calls. They write them down, right? I was like, all right, now let's go to your text messages. Do the same exact thing. And I was like, where are you more heavy on? Are you more heavy on growth friends, or are you more heavy on maintenance relationships? 9 times out of 10, maintenance relationships is way over to the right, right?
Sure.
Very little in growth relationships. And I was like, you got to change who you're talking to. You got to change all these problems, whatever the problem is, you start talking to people who have the same problem or who have had the same problem, you're not going to have the problem anymore. You just got to change who you're talking to. I was like, either you can do that on your own, or you can go join a community like the W2 Capitalists, where this is all we're doing is talking about that. And most of the members who join our mastermind, where we have like 20 virtual Zoom calls a month, they double their portfolio in the first 11 months.
Wow.
right? And it's because they come in, they're held accountable, they find partners. That's one of the most interesting things that has come out of the whole thing is I didn't expect to know to get partners out of it, let alone see how many partnerships develop just organically. People get to know one another. They get to, hey, I appreciate that risk tolerance. Like I appreciate your view on that market. Let's do the deal together, and then they go find one and do one. It's
Let's
pretty
talk about
impressive.
partnerships a minute. So you've got this
Yeah.
joint venture partnership with the 16 unit, right? You said there's
Yeah.
five of you.
Yes.
Would you mind sharing a little bit of how you structured that, like partnership, and then maybe kind of how you've tackled the deal?
So the deal actually came to us from Preston. Preston, he was at a hunting camp one weekend, and he's talking to people. He's never done a deal before, but he's talking to folks that he's around about, hey, I want to get involved in real estate investing and blah blah blah. One of his hunting buddies knows a broker, talks to the broker. Broker's got a deal that is under contract, but he doesn't think that the buyers are going to close on it. And so Preston and I and the broker get on a phone call. We start looking at numbers, and it makes sense. And so we the property fell out of contract on a Friday. We had our offer in on Wednesday morning, whatever the case was, right? And so by Friday afternoon, it was we were under contract on it, right? Does that make sense? I don't know if I explained that right.
So you had it the
Um,
Wednesday before it went out.
yeah, we had our offer in the Wednesday before that it fell out of
Nice.
contract, and
That's
so
perfect.
uh, and so Preston, I forget the percentage, but he got a percentage of the deal. He didn't bring any money uh, to closing. He helped put some money down for the earnest money deposit. But other than that, he didn't put anything else into the deal, and now he owns, let's call it 10%. I think it's around there. The other partners got a value, a certain share percentage based on how much money they contributed to the down payment, what we needed to close.
And
Right.
how big a down payment were you guys looking at?
This is it's like 300,000, I think.
Okay, cool.
300 doesn't sound right. I think it's close to 270, give or
Nice.
take.
So then all the
So
partners just kind of pitched in a certain amount, however much they put in, that's how much
correct,
equity they
correct.
got. And you guys are all like, is there like a general partner running all this, taking like, or is it just kind of a joint venture, just kind of evened out?
It is labeled a joint venture, right? And we had an attorney draw up the paperwork, our operating agreement on what we can do. And basically, so I am the manager of the joint venture, right?
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them, they essentially, if I'm not doing something right or to their liking, then they can nominate somebody to take my place,
Cool.
right? That's typical language for that. Um, but I have certain parameters that I follow in. Like I can't spend over 3 grand. I think it's 3 grand for any one particular item without getting a majority of the rest of the partners to agree to it, right?
Cool.
And then when it comes to selling the property, then it requires a super majority of the partners to agree to it. So basically what that means is, and it's not, it's 51% is majority, 67% is a super majority, right?
Okay, cool.
And it's not the number of partners, but it's the total of equity that votes one way or the other,
Right, right. If
right?
someone put in twice as much as another guy, he kind of has like
Correct.
two votes virtually.
Correct. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. So is it what was the game plan strategy going in? Is it a long hold cash flow or is it like, hey, let's, increase the NOI and exit this thing for a windfall? Or what was kind of the group consensus
Yeah.
of the goal?
Um, th- and I'm stumbling because I don't remember. uh, if I remember, if I'm kind of, well, let me tell you where we're at now. Right?
Yeah.
Is kind of this is a tertiary. I've been introducing the term quaduciary. I don't know if that's an actual word,
Okay.
but it is a
Yeah.
very small market. It's like a 5,000 member community city, so to speak, right? And so it's very small area. So think of rural Alabama is where it's located, and it is, if we list a unit for that it's open, we get inundated with applications.
Mm-hmm.
And we have since progressed. One of the properties has a pretty decent size of land that we can develop on. We start talking about that. And another property that we have, all part of the same 16 unit, we've bought an adjacent vacant piece of land with the idea that we could build another potential fourplex. So I did, ever since this is our 13th, 14th month since we removed the property manager that was stealing from us. And so now I got a good 12, now I have a good T12,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And if interest rates were favorable, right now we could refinance and give everybody else their money back based off of a 7.5 cap, right? And so then it's just infinite returns.
Yep.
So it doesn't make sense to sell it. But what I'm trying to wait on is, do we wait in hopes that interest rates come down? We're only into year 2 of our mortgage. It's a 5-year arm, right? Or do we wait until, we keep increasing NOI and then we do a cash out refinance, but we take that money and develop some more units, right? So there's some options there, but I think it's going to be a long-term hold. I don't think we're going to exit anytime soon.
That's one thing I love about real estate is there's so many options, like you said. It's
Yeah,
like, and especially if you're working with partners that you trust each other, you like each other, it's kind of like, hey, let's all just make money, and obviously you have all the contracts in place, which is super important. But
yeah,
like I say, you go with the flow of the market. You know what I mean? If interest rates are different, it might be different. But since this is how
yeah,
this is, we're gonna do this. And there's so many different ways to make money with it or make it profitable depending that you don't have to force something in the wrong environment.
yeah, yeah. And there's always, you got to go in with a couple different exit strategies and to be willing to pivot if none of those are able to pan out.
Yeah.
We receive unsolicited offers frequently, probably about once every 3 months. We'll get an unsolicited offer to buy it, and we're like, no, it's not high enough. And so, we're got another 500 to it, and then we'll talk, but nobody's bid on that, and I don't expect them to, but I've been surprised before. So
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Everything's for sale for the right price,
yeah, for the
right?
right price, yeah.
It's like, hey, anything's for sale. I'll move out of my house for $400 a night, right?
Well,
At
that's
least
it.
for a
That's
month or
it.
two. You're like,
That's,
okay, all right.
and we
It'll
get
be cheaper to be on the road than it will to be at home. So I'll
it
make more
is
money
it,
traveling.
it is we get paid to travel. That's the thing. We not only do we get paid to travel, but we make money off of it. And
Yeah.
we've received a couple of unsolicited offers here. And the house probably worth 550, 600, and I don't know. And we've been offered that, and we just turned it down. It's like, no way. That's not. I told my wife the other day, I was like, no, somebody offered us 1 million. Would you take it? And she quickly said no. I was like, I wouldn't either. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think that's not what we're in it for. Um,
When you got to think, I
so,
always say, like, you don't sell assets for money, you trade assets for better assets.
mm,
And it's like, well, what are you going to do with that money? You know what I mean?
yeah,
If you have a good game plan and a strategy and something lined up that's going to give you more freedom, more comfort, more luxury, more, cash flow, whatever your goals are,
yeah,
it's like if it's all aligned, then cool. But sometimes people are like, oh, we can make 100 grand or 500 grand or $1 million. It's like, that's all sounds exciting. But if you lose your only asset, if you kill the golden goose, what good
yeah. I
does
mean,
all those eggs do? So you got to have an idea of what you're going to do with it.
I know exactly what I'd do with it. I mean, I would just do more hard money loans. That is some of the best passive income I've ever. I mean, talk about no very little involvement. You sign some papers on closing day, make sure you get paid at the first of the month, and that's it, right? The thing about here though is it is a hybrid between our personal home versus a B and B, and
Yeah.
we make a lot of memories here, and we've
Yeah,
made a lot of
exactly.
memories here, and so it's really hard to put a price tag on that.
That means you're gonna have
you
to go
know.
buy another home that's more comfortable
Well, that's
fits you better, you know?
that's what she said. If we could, because we're not on the beach, but she said if we could trade up to a house that's directly on the beach, has a pool and all this, she goes, yeah, I'd do it. I was like, that's
Yeah.
a good point. That's a good
Yeah.
point.
So keep your eye open and get two pieces together. So before we're out of time, let's talk about the hard money lending because obviously that's
Yeah.
something you've been doing. Um, a lot of people have heard about the hard money lending on the borrowing side, like, oh, I can borrow this hard money to, lock this deal down fast. And then, I give them, they're 15% or whatever. It's
Yeah.
expensive, but it's short term and it helps me move my business forward. Right.
Right.
But now you're doing hard money on the other end where you're the one lending it for that
Yep.
expensive amount short term. One, how did you get into that? Two, well,
Mm.
how do you secure yourself to make sure that that money just doesn't disappear with some ignorant investor that
Investor.
buys the wrong asset?
Yeah. So the way I got into this about 2 years ago, um, we have these virtual calls. We have about 20 a month in the mastermind, and the more I was on those calls, the more these folks were really good about finding really great deals, but they had trouble finding money for them, right? And I kept getting tired of hearing that. And eventually, what would happen is another member would step up, and this is where a lot of partnerships evolved and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what if we had, hard money lending business that lent only to the mastermind members, right? That kind of solves that problem if I'm listening to those. And there just happened to be a guy in our community who's in the mortgage business, had been in the mortgage business for a few years, really, 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 Cody. He's really smart, really sharp when it comes to that. So I approached him and a couple of other, what I call VPs, and these are people who are niche focused on multifamily or fix and flipping. And they would, and I said, hey, what do you think about us doing this or exploring this? And about a year after having those conversations, then we officially launched. Um, and we launched about a year ago, this past July. And so it's been great. We've actually lent outside of the mastermind. Most of our deals, I'd say almost 80% of our deals have come from inside with the members of the mastermind. We have lent outside of the mastermind. How do we secure ourselves? I think is your next question.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's very much relationship lending, and so the benefit of being in the mastermind on these calls for these folks for years, or months, we get to know them, we get to know more about them and know that they're not some scam artist, you know?
Right.
And so they're willing to put the time in and devote to the community and whatnot. And then the other thing, the more technical aspect of it is, we only lend up to 70% of the estimated ARV.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have money to close and they have to have money to kick off the rehab, right? So one of the things, and there are depending on which hard money lender you talk to, they have all different guidelines, right? And when we went into this, because not only were we using our own money, but we've started raising money from private lenders who they just want the deal flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to have to go out and look for deals themselves. But what we've been able to do is but I'm sorry, let me back up. Got lost. I got lost there. Is
You're good.
with those guidelines, there are some hard money lenders that if you have, let's say it's 100%, they're going to finance 100% of the purchase plus 100% of the rehab. Then they fund the purchase and then they'll give you all the money for the rehab. There's horror stories out there where these unethical, immoral people will go out and they'll take that money that they were supposed to allocate to their Riverside rehab, and they'll go to Vegas with it or whatever,
Sure.
and they don't care what happens to the property because they have nothing in it, right?
Yeah.
They basically swapped about $10,000 in closing costs for 100,000, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a good exchange if you're a crook. And so the way we protect ourselves and protect our lenders is we only do up to 70% of the ARV. Our borrowers have to have money to get started with the project, so they have to have money to get for closing, and then about 10 grand or so to start the rehab. And then once they go through the rehab and we can verify that the rehab has been completed, then we'll, issue a draw, right? So then we do that a couple different ways. We'll have a picture for verification. We'll have, when one of the pieces of paperwork they submit is a scope of work. So I have to check off a scope of work, right? Sheetrock or framing, whatever the case is. And we only pay for those things that have been checked off, right?
I like that. And then do you have equity stake in the properties then as well? So if things go south, you actually get to take the property and you own that as collateral?
So no equity. So the property is titled into the borrower's entity name, but we are in first lien position.
Okay.
So if they don't pay or whatnot, now we haven't had a deal go sour, but we know it's coming. It just rules of
Right.
the rule of numbers is just going to happen one day eventually, no matter how good we go about vetting borrowers and vetting deals. But we are in first lien position, so if we need to foreclose, and then we'll go through the foreclosure process. And um, one of those things, to answer another part of the answer to how do we protect ourselves, we only lend in 33 states. So think of California, New York, any blue or Democratic state, we're probably not going to be
Right.
lending in there, right? So
That's cool. That's awesome, man. I think there's a lot of power and strength in that. And like you said, that's the real passive income is
it is,
if you
yeah,
have the money to do it, right?
yeah,
And that's what's cool, man. I love that about real estate, and everybody probably gets tired of me saying this. It's such a win-win, right? Like providing hard money is a lifesaver. I mean, for investors trying to get into it, whether they're brand new or they've been doing it for decades, they still love to use hard money. It's an awesome tool to just move things forward, you know? So it's like
yeah.
it's such a win for them. And then it's such a win for you as well. And even the investors you're bringing in to help fund those, it's just like everybody's winning along the way if you do it right, which is super cool. So I love that.
And and one of the things that I had to get over personally, back to the mental game, right, is you listen to a lot of podcasts that talk so negatively about hard money. Don't use it. It's nothing but a scam, blah, blah, blah. And it's just not the case, right? Now, it is
No,
scary. If
no.
you've never done it before, if you've never been involved in it, it is a little scary, just like anything else, right? Like your first time you buy a deal, it was probably really scary. At least it was for me. And even
Sure.
though it was like a $25,000 purchase, I was sweating pins and needles. And so it's just one of those things where there's so much negativity about it, but it is an extremely useful tool, like you said, for beginner or veteran investors. We had a guy we just closed a loan with. He's got he had $1 million in cash, and I look at my partners like, why in the heck? And he's buying a $200,000 home with $100,000 in rehab. I'm like, why in the heck is he coming to us and borrow money at 12% when he's got $1 million in cash? And we don't know. So we went and asked him, and he said, well, there's a mental aspect. He goes, I just like having that money sit in the bank.
Hmm.
I was like, okay, I get it. Out of our bank accounts, when it gets to, below a certain number, I'm like, all right, I'm going to stress a little bit. There's some anxiety is going to kick up. I get it. And he realizes that that the project's going to more than pay for itself, right? And he still keeps to keep his nest egg wherever he had it, right? So it is for beginners and experienced investors for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Like say it's only scary if you have no idea what you're doing. You make a ton of mistakes with your
Yeah.
numbers, you know. But if you learn the basics and you can be a beginner and still learn the basics, then it can be a really powerful tool. You know, I've helped students, use hard money and get set up with that, and you look at the numbers and then you move forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's super cool, man. Well, we won't eat up your whole day, but obviously you're doing a bunch of cool stuff. If people want to follow you or learn more about what you're doing, what's the best way for people to kind of get in touch and see what you've got going on?
Just text me. 205-249-0248 is my cell phone. Just text me. It comes to me. I don't have my VA answering that yet. I don't even know if she can because that's just like a Verizon number. But anyway, text me. If you call, I'm not going to answer. It's going to go straight to
There you go.
voicemail because I have it set up to where if you're not in my phone book, then it doesn't ring. And so, but
Okay, I
texts are
like
going to
that.
come in. Yeah, it's two things I did about a year ago with my phone is unless you're programmed as a known person into my phone would not ring. And with texting, I don't have notifications on for texting because it was
Nice.
driving me nuts that I would be
Sure.
sitting here working on something, trying to figure something out,
Ding, ding,
and then here
ding.
comes a distraction. Knowing that 20 times a day I'm going to pick up my phone and look at and see who texted me and respond to them. I was going to do that anyway. Why do I need the distraction? So I turn those off. But yeah, text is best. So if you want to check out what we got going on in the W2 Capitalist, that's simply w2capitalist.com. But if you want a free copy of the book, then go to makeanofferbook.com and I'll send you a free copy of the book.
Perfect. That's awesome, man. Well, before we go, I'm going to go through our final 4 questions here that we ask all the
All
guests, and we'll
right.
see how you do here. So, all right, question number 1 is what is a non-real estate related bucket list item you've recently checked off or you're excited to check off next?
Recently checked off. We made it to Montana and got to experience the big sky of Montana.
Hmm.
That was pretty incredible. It's one of those places where I want to go back. Like we weren't there long enough. We need to go back and do a little bit more slow traveling in Montana. Yeah.
Love it. All right. Question number 2. What book are you currently reading?
Oh man. So Audible. I can't
Hmm.
pick up a physical copy of a book without falling asleep, right? Um,
No,
so the
Audible's
one,
the best. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I love it.
So right now it's Debt, the First 5,000 Years, I think is the name of it.
Hmm.
Can't get it to come up.
Okay. That sounds interesting. Debt, the first 5,000 years. Teach about how
Yeah,
debt was invented and used.
it is a very interesting. Um, if you're a history buff, you'll enjoy it for sure.
Cool. I
Yeah.
like that. All right. So beyond just books, and you could recommend your favorite book, but or a course or podcast or YouTube channel or just anything that you think, man, people should go check this out. Besides stuff that we're associated with, what's something you'd refer people to go look at?
Real estate investing wise,
It could be real estate or anything else, whatever suits you.
um, I don't really know, Joe. I'm supposed to have an answer for this. All right, ask me one more time. Why?
So
Kill
just
the
any
dead space.
book, content, podcast, YouTube channel, anything you'd recommend. Maybe just a book that
Gotcha.
really kind of helped stir you, to get moving at the beginning or something like that.
Well, here's one thing. Another. It's a long book, but it basically it talks about. It's called the Creature from Jekyll Island. Have you ever heard of
Oh,
that one?
I've heard of it. I've got it on Audible. I have not put on my big boy pants to tackle it. It looks super. I mean, I don't know. It's like 19 hours or something
It's
crazy.
24 hours long. Yeah,
Yeah.
you get the Mount Everest badge when you listen to this one,
Yeah. I
right?
was just like,
And
whew.
so, but here's what was, and I'm getting thinking about this. But when I was listening to this, and basically the book goes into how the IRS was created, why it was created, and how corrupt it is, and the whole thing, right? And so I was listening to this as Russia was starting to invade Ukraine.
Mm,
And the whole, so that was one thing that's happening. And then that bank out in California, SVP or something
yeah.
like
Yeah.
that, was filing for bankruptcy or whatnot. And I'm listening to this book as those two things are playing out. And I was like, if this book is true, then this is going to happen next for Russia and Ukraine, and then this is going to happen for SVP. And it was almost to the T. Like,
Wow.
this is what happens. Like, and if you ever think, one of the things that really kind of stood out for me in that book is if you think about it, you know, there hasn't been a modern day war where other countries were just simply annihilated. Doesn't
Right.
happen anymore because that's not the most profitable way.
It's not useful. That's what I
It's
keep
not
saying.
useful. It's not
Yep.
useful. So the book goes into that. And so if I get confused being a conspiracy theorist, but I'm like, but when they're true, they're not theories. They're just
Right.
truths. You just got to accept it. But if you ever been labeled a conspiracy theorist, you'll eat up the creature from Jekyll Island.
There you
Yeah,
go. And it's really interesting when, like, say, when you're learning something and you go, oh, so is this going to happen? Then it does. It's like you
it
just feel like you have
does.
this
It's like,
superpower. You're just like, oh my gosh. And that's
yeah,
what, I remember when I was first diving into real estate, really, really hardcore. And I started understanding interest rates in the market, and like I saw it all happening before it was happening. Same thing, I'm like, oh, I need to go pull out this cash to refinance, and I do this because this is what's going to happen. And it's like you think it's all a mystery, but once you know the moving parts, it's like it's not as unpredictable as you think. Like it's
yeah.
telling you as
There's
you
yeah,
go. You
yeah,
can't say 2 years from now, 5 years from now, but you can see the progression,
yeah,
So
yeah.
okay, well maybe you gave me the incentive I need to actually start tackling that one. So
It's a very interesting one, man. When I started listening to it, I got through it in about it was either 7 or 10 days because I just got hooked and I was like, all right,
just
I
got
gotta
into it.
see what's
Okay.
next. Yeah, yeah.
I love it. All right. I'm glad we pushed through that question. I'm actually excited for that one. Um, all right. So, okay, last question, then we'll let you go, my man. All right.
Okay.
What would your text message to the world be? You pull out your phone that you have on silent. You decide to text not only everybody that's waiting to hear back from you, but everybody else on the whole planet. What's Jay Helms going to tell the world?
Uh, Man, do I go deep or do I do some marketing? I don't. I mean, the first thing that pops in mind is earn, invest, repeat because that just that's been our tagline for 5 years from now. And if you
Mm,
dive into that, um, you earn from your W-2, you invest that in real estate, and you just repeat the process, right? And then when I
love
got
it.
laid off, everybody was like, "Was it? Is it still going to be earn, invest, repeat?" And I was like, "Well, yes, because we're earning money from our rental properties. We're still taking that money, investing it back into more rental properties, and we're just repeating the process." But I will say this whole uh, life by design. Okay, I'm mid 40s, have 3 kids, and so here's what my tech. Am I limited to 240 characters? What was in the
You can do a long
no,
text.
no. So I would say this. I don't until we started traveling as quote no quote unquote nomads or doing our version of slow traveling. I don't really think that I lived, right? And that's
Mm,
not a knock on my wife or because I met her before we started doing that. We got married. The way we met was very interesting, but there's just going, and this is coming from an introverted who likes to stay at home, right? Remember, I
yeah.
fought my wife for a year before I said, okay, let's try to do this, right? And now I can't seem to get enough of it. But I don't feel like I lived until we started doing this. Like we started going out and living life on our own terms, which gave me a greater appreciation of what it means to be financially free, right? I've said it many times, I can echo it all the way probably back to 2018. I want to be financially free. I didn't really know what I was saying until I actually started doing it, right? So if I could say anything is treat your life or life should be designed by you and not somebody else, right? You
I
do what
love
you want
that.
to do.
That's cool, man. That's really cool. We could do a whole podcast just on that. I think like there's something about like say when you step out of the normal rhythm that society has trained us to
Yeah,
accept, you have this embrace of life that's just not normal. Like, oh,
it's
like my
it's
mind, it
different.
can think clearly. I can see, I can smell. Like it's just a different rhythm of life. And it's like, oh, that's what actual living is, as opposed to just spinning.
Yeah, ants. The whole Dave Matthews song "Ants Marching" has taken on a whole new meaning
There you
since we
go.
started living this nomadic lifestyle.
I bet. All right,
Yeah,
Mel, this has been a treat. Thank you so much for being on the show. Excited to follow your journey and see what you're doing, and for everybody else too as well. If there's anything that we can do for you, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. But thanks for being on the show.
thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Yep, this is Joe Jensen signing off for the Real Estate Investing School podcast, reminding you to pay attention to who you're talking to.